Welcome back to Podiatry Marketing. I'm your host, Jim McDannald, here with Tyson Franklin. Tyson, how are things going today?
I'm fantastic today, Jim. Great to catch up again for another episode of the Podiatry Marketing Podcast. Getting some great feedback from people who are listening to it, which is why we decided to put our heads together and do this thing.
Yeah, it's been nice. I've been getting some messages on LinkedIn and Facebook. People really enjoying the show, and some of the topics we're going to talk about today, I think, will also be of interest. We've been doing this the pillars of podiatry marketing. What are we going to be getting into today with pillar number 5?
Pillar number 5 is what I call verbal marketing. And verbal marketing to me is anytime you actually open your mouth and you are talking to another person, whether it's an individual or a group of people, that is verbal marketing. So it's a very broad sort of topic.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's when you're opening your mouth in different places, different times, different locations. I think a lot of people have gotten used to, over the course of the last couple of years, a lot of online, more time than they've ever wanted. But with live events going on now, when you're in that position as a speaker or even in your community, in your profession, it's a great opportunity to get your name out there and be seen as an expert in your niche or in the profession. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into that with you today.
I think what you touched on then about Zoom too, I think it's opened up the world a little bit more to most of us. So yeah, like I was on Zoom a lot anyway because of podcasts and because of business coaching, but I had the opportunity a number of times over the last 2 years to speak for groups in Ireland, to speak to people in Canada, to speak to people in Arizona, purely just because I could do it online, didn't have to jump on a plane and actually be there. I think Zoom opened up a lot of opportunities. And I also think when people think verbal marketing, a lot of times they're thinking public speaking is verbal marketing. And that's just one aspect of public speaking.
No, that's a great point. I think, to be honest, I'm not sure if this podcast would have happened if it weren't for the COVID-19 experience. Us getting together, being able to speak on a weekly basis about these topics we're sharing with folks, and then some other topics we don't always share after we hit stop record. So yeah, definitely there's been a huge opportunity. Like you said, there's many different types of verbal marketing for sure.
Yeah, when I think verbal marketing, first thing a lot of people say, oh, do you mean public speaking? And like I said, that's one part of verbal marketing. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't like public speaking. Yeah, I get really nervous. And there's a great quote by Mark Twain, and it said there's 2 types of people that do public speaking: those who get nervous and liars. And so basically saying everybody gets nervous doing public speaking. And another quote I read somewhere, and it said, if you don't get nervous before doing a presentation or a talk, it means you don't care.
Yeah.
And I've been to talks where the speaker's gotten up there and you can just tell they've been paid. They're just going through the motions. They're a bit of a celebrity. They're telling the same story they've told 250 times over the last 2 years. And you can tell they're bored and they don't care. And they probably have no nerves. So I think anyone who's listening to this, if you sort of go, oh, I'm nervous about public speaking, that is perfectly normal. I recall I'd managed to get through primary school, high school, university without ever getting up and doing a public presentation. I just wouldn't do it. I was too scared, petrified. And I remember at uni, they said, oh, you have to do this presentation. I said, oh, what's it worth? They said 40%. I said, you put me down for a 0. So I won't be doing that. I said, I will get 50 out of 60 for the exam and I'll pass. That's all I need to do. And they said, oh, no, you must do the oral presentation. And this happened at high school too. So I got up there one day. I got up there and I went smack down. Did nothing, said nothing, got 0 out of what the mark was, then passed the exam and got through. So I didn't get up in front of anyone and do my first talk. I think it was 26 when I did the first one.
Wow.
Shit my pants. Yeah, it's terrible.
More than 2.5 decades before you got up in front of a crowd or a small audience to discuss things.
It was horrible. This doctor contacted me and said, oh, we had someone who's going to do this sports medicine module. I know you know this topic really well. Can you come and do the talk? And for some reason, I said, yeah, not a problem. And after I hung up the phone, I went, what were you thinking? So I managed to take a 45-minute presentation, and I think I brought it down to about 4.5 minutes. And I ummed and ahed, and I was sweating everywhere. And then I pretty much finished it, and I just walked out of the room. And I sat down and I went, my God, that was the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. Anyway, the doctor came out, put his hand on my shoulder, And I thought, oh, he's going to give me some encouragement. I wasn't as bad as I thought, obviously. And he said, that was the worst presentation I have ever seen in my life. He goes, if anybody ever asks you to do public speaking, just say no. Don't do it. Don't do that to them. Don't do it to the crowd. Don't do it to yourself. And he walked away, and I should have actually just given up at that point. But for some reason, this thing went off in my head and went, you could never be that bad again. So we did it again, and I was awful. And I did it again, and I was just bad. And then the more I did it, all of a sudden I slowly started going up until I'm the magnificent speaker I am today.
No, I can totally understand that. I think that when you're staring at either at a crowd or a camera, it can be very disarming. And you feel like you're just like a huge spotlight is on you and you feel nervous. But and honestly, like I remember going to conferences as a student, as a podiatry resident, even in practice and thinking, I'm just in the audience. I'm just here for the CMEs and the medical education. That will never be me. But it wasn't until one of my clients said, hey, like, you're giving me a lot of value and a lot of information that's really helpful. I have a state association meeting I'm a part of. Like, you should come and talk at this meeting. And like, I can see the value of it. Obviously, as someone that is a podiatrist providing these services, they want to hear from a source that they trust. I said yes, and it wasn't perfect, but definitely it was something where, I overcame that fear, put my name out there, also provided some value to the people that were in the audience. I think especially the whole reason I'm a podiatry marketing to begin with is because I feel like podiatrists can sometimes be easy marks for nefarious agencies. Not everyone's bad out there, but there's
marketing sharks.
Yeah, there's just like a sense of like that it needs to be done, but you don't know how to do it. And then who do you trust to do it for you, or how do you do it in a way that's cost effective? And so by giving talks and providing educational materials like we're talking today to help people build that confidence that these channels and these things do work, I think is a huge value add. And each podiatrist listening to this podcast right now has their own area of expertise or messages that are important to them. They'd like to share with either their patients or their colleagues, and utilizing verbal marketing or getting out there and talking about it is really important. But you don't just automatically become a great speaker. It takes time and practice and lots of embarrassing moments.
2 really good tips that were given to me. First one was the people you were talking to. Nobody is sitting there in the crowd hoping you crash and burn. Nobody sits there, sees a speaker come up on stage and goes, geez, I hope they really stuff up today. I need a laugh. Nobody does it. They are there wanting you to succeed. So there's no nasty people in the room usually. And then the other part was, if you're talking to a group of people that are not podiatrists, for example, which is a great place to start your public speaking, to Rotary, different clubs and organizations, realize that you are the smartest person in the room when it comes to the topic you're about to talk about. Even if there could be a surgeon in the room. There may be another type of doctor. There could be a physio. Doesn't matter. If you're talking about a podiatry topic, and as a podiatrist, you know that topic better than anybody else in the room. So you should walk in there with all this confidence, like, I am the smartest person in the room here on this particular subject that I'm going to talk about. And then add that too, and nobody in the crowd wants to see you crash and burn. So even if you got a bit nervous, if you just take your time and pause, they're fine with that. They just want you to get through and share the information, just like you were talking about.
No, it's a perfect point. I think taking time to pause and reflect, and just sometimes you get so nervous, right? You don't realize how fast you're talking. You're not enunciating. It's just, there's so many little details that go into speaking in a podcast or speaking in public. It just takes practice and time.
My first podcast, It's No Secret, with Dr. T. And I remember the first guest I had on there, and I may have told the story before, and it was the first person I did not know, complete stranger. He was an author, asked him to come on the podcast. And I remember doing my introduction, and my throat was so dry. And as I'm getting the words out, nobody else reckons they can hear it, but I can hear my voice go, just starting to get squeaky and high towards the end. Once I got through that and we started talking, then it was all fine. But that first part of it was really hard. And this leads me on to an easier form of verbal marketing is network meetings, going to networking events. And a lot of people are also, they're afraid to say what they do or say what they do with confidence. And that's why I reckon it's really important. Really sit down and think about this question. Pretend, and this may shock people, but someone may come up to you and say, by the way, Jim, what do you do?
Exactly.
Yeah. And people go, oh, Yeah, they happen and I'm thinking, you didn't think somebody was going to ask you what do you do? So have a really precise, thought out response that's 10 or 15 seconds that makes them say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. And then go on from there.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point there is having that short description of what you do, what you work on, and like finding ways to engage that person as well. Obviously, like once you say what you do, make sure you return the favor and ask them about their profession or kind of what brought them to the meeting and just start that kind of like
Yeah.
organic conversation. And once you start getting over that initial ice or that initial friction, or just like you talked about, if you're on stage and everyone's staring at you, that's one thing, right? That's a different type of pressure. So if you imagine that
Yeah.
is like the high level pressure, going to one of these like mixers or networking meetings, it's low pressure. Just have something to say and just be engaging with other people. And that's all you really have to do.
Yeah. And don't be that person when you go to a network. I'll go this way. To me, networking events are a long game marketing strategy. So I remember when I came to Cairns, some of the people I met at the first networking events I ever went to 28 years ago were some of my best patients in my clinic over that period of time that I actually owned the business. Because I met them at different networking events. I said who I was. I told them what I did. I didn't ram a business card straight into the hand straight away unless they asked me for one. But then the next month I'd see him again. And then the next year I'd see him again. And over time, you were starting to have these small conversations and they'd seen some of your other marketing. They would ask more questions. You would ask more questions. And eventually say, hey, Tyson, by the way, do you have a business card on you? Yeah, I do actually. And I give them a business card. To me, networking is definitely a long game marketing strategy. Don't be that person that you see running around the room trying to stick a business card in everybody's hand. And then everyone sees them come in. Oh my God, it's them again. Then everyone goes the opposite direction.
Yeah, it just takes a long time to build trust with people. It's like that dating versus marriage analogy. You wouldn't just run up to some person you just met and ask them to marry you. So you just have to be genuine with them.
Yeah, and if they said yes, how weird would it be?
It depends on what they're like, no, but
True.
Yeah, you just have to build up trust. You have to build up some understanding. Like I talked about, just being interested in what they're doing as well is hugely important, right? If you're just, like you said, if you're just handing out business cards, you're being very transactional. It's all about me. Like people are going to see right through that, right? They want to have these kind of build a long-term network of people instead of just these short-term transactional relationships. I don't think that's beneficial to anyone unless you're needing like something very specific. For these professional organizations or these local networks, you're going to run into these people all the time, right? So that first impression is hugely important to show that you're just not self-serving and that you do care about what they're up to as well.
Yeah. And to me, it's also with networking events, there's other tips when it comes to networking about what you're wearing and should match your brand and what you do, and should also match the crowd that you're actually going to be meeting with. Some networking events are free. Some networking events are going to be paid. You'll normally find the paid events will normally have a speaker and it might be more targeted towards something you want to learn, and the group may be more targeted to you. Whereas a free just networking event could be a lot more broad sort of people there. So it may not suit what you're doing, but you won't know until you go. And don't make the mistake of, I've seen networking events where I've gone along and I see the same people in the same little groups hidden in the same corner at every event. And you go, what are you learning or who are you meeting by standing over there in the shadows? The idea of networking is to network.
I think that's
and have fun with it.
I think that's a great point. You have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. That's why you're going to these things in the first place. If you're just going to go there to, let's say I come down to Australia and we're just hanging out like every single week at the networking event, just you and I drinking some rum and cokes in the corner. Like it would be fun hanging out with you and doing that, but we're not really building our business or building our network there when we're doing those kind of things. You got to be a little bit uncomfortable in life in order to like really make some changes and make some progress.
Yeah. I think people sometimes get networking events and conferences mixed up. So a lot of times you'll go to a conference because you want to catch up with friends, colleagues that you haven't seen for a few years. And you get your little cliquey groups together who've got the same interests. And sometimes I think people take that habit of doing that at a conference and they translate that into a networking event, thinking, networking is where I'm catching up with friends that I know and colleagues. But no, it's really to meet other people. And a good example of when you do meet someone for the first time is what they call an elevator speech. Picture you hop into an elevator and the person's getting off at the 10th floor and it's going all the way through. That's the amount of time you've got to tell someone what you do and have them say, that's interesting. Tell me more. So the period, you don't have 2 minutes. So if you time yourself and you're taking 2 minutes, this is the easiest thing. You meet someone, you start chatting to them, you see them look over your shoulder and you go, oh, I'll just come back and say, I just saw someone that I was supposed to catch up with. That means you blew it.
A little bit too long, a
That's a
little
good
too
sign.
long or not interesting enough. Yeah.
Yeah, you see them raising their eyebrows going, wow, yeah, that's great. Or they look at someone going, save me. And then a third person will actually come over. But I think this getting used to talking to people, such a valuable skill because one, it makes you a better communicator with your patients. But also if you get the opportunity to be at a trade show or an expo and you're standing behind a table and you're displaying whatever it is you're displaying, you need to be able to communicate with people doing that. And I've been at networking events. Perfect example would be Cairns Businesswomen Club. They do a great networking lunch every month. And back in the day when I first used to go to it, I was the only male that used to go. I stood out, had my podiatry shirt on. It was very easy to start a conversation because I was the only person that was male. I was going to say something else then. That was male, the distinguishing feature. And I'd be sitting there. I remember sitting there once, and what they would do, they would call out to the crowd and go, is there anybody here who would like to come up and do a 60-second power speech on your business? And you'd see all these people slowly just slumping down into their chairs. And also a couple of people put their hand up. They'd go up there for free and we'd give a 1 or 2 minute little talk about their business. And 3 people get the opportunity to do that at each session. And it was always the same 3 people because you see the rest of them, as soon as they ask people just slumping down, because then they would sometimes go, sure, there isn't anyone. They'd be start looking around the room, volunteers. And what an awesome opportunity to talk about your business in front of 250 people. But because of fear, people won't do it.
Yeah. It's like we talked about, you got to get comfortable, feeling a little bit uncomfortable sometimes to make progress and to get your name out there.
Definitely. And I think that the more modern verbal marketing is more like what we're doing now, podcasting, is whether you're doing your own podcast or whether it's guest podcasting, this is a really great platform for getting yourself out there, getting known. If there's a particular subject in podiatry that you're really passionate about and you think you're as good as anybody else on that subject, get on podcasts and talk about it. Share it with the world.
No, for sure. I think there's huge opportunities. I think there used to be a lot of, I would say guest writing was the big thing, right? Right for Podiatry Management or Podiatry Today or some kind of written publication. But a lot of these organizations now also have podcasts and they have, roundtables with 3 or 4 different podiatrists talking about different subjects, surgery, diabetic care, all these different things. There's definitely an episode about your niche. Contacting these folks definitely could be a way for you to gain more visibility in that niche. But then also there's a local layer, right? There's these local podcasts or, local informational broadcasts that go on as well. So when you can be, talk about the value you provide to your local community as well. It doesn't necessarily only have to be podiatry specific. You can talk more generally about foot and ankle wellness in your local area, living active lifestyles, whatever you feel like you bring value to your local community.
Yeah, I just think there's so much opportunity out there. And I think if you're letting fear, and this is my final tip, if you're letting fear hold you back, you're missing out on so many opportunities. I look at the amount of opportunities I had to speak that I said no to, and I look back now and I go, those doors were open to you and you just totally missed it. I remember even though it was 26 when I got up the first time and spoke, didn't mean that I didn't enjoy it at all, as I mentioned. And it wasn't that 2 years later, all of a sudden I was good. I remember at 32, I think it was the last year I was playing rugby union, I won the award for best back. And I was also the captain of not the captain, I was the president of the rugby club. I wouldn't go to the presentation night because I didn't want to have to get the trophy and do a speech. So I just didn't go. I was the only sports captain at school that I loved being out there on the sports field. I loved getting the crowd going, getting everyone fired up. But I didn't want to have to go up there and do a speech in front of the school. So I just wouldn't turn up for the sports night. And I was the sports captain of the school. I missed out on a lot purely out of fear.
I think sometimes we're our own worst critics, right? Like we hold ourselves to a high level and we don't, even when I listen to this podcast, sometimes to be honest, or other times that I've been on video or the ways I look on video, it's very easy to be self-critical.
Yeah.
All the I say, all the things that I notice about that's not perfect in the way that I talk on a podcast or in a video, but it's one of those things where it does take the reps and the consistency and you'll get better at it. I think it can be daunting to look at a microphone or stare into a camera and try to look professional and look presentable to folks. But the more you do it, the more you do public speaking, the more you talk on a podcast, the more you do online video, the more comfortable you become with it. But there's no shortcut or magic way to bypass the hard work or the reps. Just like anything else, like you have to put in the time and the effort and really want it to succeed in order for it to happen. Because it's not going to just, we're not all like Tyson Franklin where you just show up and just like flip on the microphone and the camera and it's just super easy, right? Some of us have to work at this, and that includes me.
It's funny. Now I don't have a problem. Like when I go up on stage, I'm nervous as hell. Always am. When I spoke at Osgo in Liverpool, 1,000 people up there, I'm walking up on stage and there's a little voice in my head that's going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. But as soon as I got up there, got through that first 60 seconds, told the joke, crowd laughed, then it was fine after that. So the only time I do not get nervous in front of people is if I'm in costume, because then it's not me.
Right.
Because you've got like a mask on, it's not you, you're playing a character. So it's not as nerve wracking. But when it's just you there, yeah, I remember hearing my voice on the podcast. I go, oh, you sound like a dick. I'd watch myself on video and I go, oh my God, everyone must think you're an idiot. But now I can turn the video camera on. I just do the recording. I jump on a podcast. I feel really comfortable and relaxed when I'm doing it, only because, including this podcast, I've probably done over, and the ones I've been a guest on, I've probably done over 600 podcasts now. I've shot hundreds of videos. So it's just practice. That's all it really is, just practicing your art. You want to be a better podiatrist? You can become a better podiatrist by practicing your art, and video, verbal marketing is no different.
I think that's a great place to leave it, Tyson. I think we touched on a lot of great stuff.
Oh, so do I.
Touched on a lot of great things in this verbal marketing segment and the pillars. So thanks for all of the examples and the knowledge you shared here with us today.
No, this has been fantastic, Jim. So I will talk to you again next week. See you later.
See you, Tyson.